Hi, um, welcome. It is May 21st. First, let me say welcome to Heather Matson officially. It was great to see your post a couple days ago and love your perspective and your logical kind of take on things. Look forward to hearing from you in some days ahead. So, with that, we continue on. We've now moved back into kind of a historical narrative, and we're in Kings and Chronicles, and got to thinking that before I kind of make a point for today in terms of our readings, that it would be good to kind of set the stage a little bit in terms of Kings and Chronicles and their canonization, or their being put into the scriptures. First of all, to give you a sense, we have 1st and 2nd Samuel, then we have 1st and 2nd Kings, and then we have 1st, 2nd Chronicles, and all three together basically make up this entire historical narrative of the kings of Israel and the historical piece. What's interesting is that 1st and 2nd Kings comprises about a 400-year history, and of course it follows 1st and 2nd Samuel. It kind of runs from King David down to Jehoiachin. And really, we're talking about a period from King David through 400 years, all the way into the Babylonian captivity. And so scholars will say that whoever wrote this really had to be living at that end time, at that time during the captivity, and was aware of what it was all about. And so that writing meant, as many guess, that it might have happened sometime during the reign of Josiah as king. What happens then, though, is in Chronicles, we really find that this was written probably even a little later than that, probably post-exile, which meant anywhere from 500 BC down to 400 BC. And there are a couple other interesting things about this. So if we look at those three sets of books as kind of historical narratives, each trying to show the thread of God's plan through history and through the kingships, they all have their value, and they all kind of touch on things in a unique way. But it's interesting, Chronicles many don't like to read. Number one, it's too long. Number two, the first few chapters deal just a whole bunch of names, and so people really don't want to read it. And secondly, there's so many overlaps with what's in Kings that people say, why do I need this one? What I found interesting as I was doing some studying is that in the Hebrew Bible, Chronicles actually goes at the very end. It was seen as the culmination. You had the list of names from Genesis all the way through the kingships, and so you had this kind of whole history put together. Very important books in the Bible. The other thing I found out about that, and of course the difference is in the Christian Bible, it was moved to immediately following 1st and 2nd Kings, and kind of gets from here on short shrift in that sense. They put Isaiah and through Malachi, they put basically all of the prophets at the end. And that was because the prophetic writings were seen to give a clearer image and picture of the coming Christ, and so they were stuck at the end to kind of announce the coming of the New Testament and the Gospels of Christ. And so our Christian Bible puts the text of the Chronicles in a different position. So we have all three of these things, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And they each offer their own perspective and a little bit of a different time perspective, though they kind of overlap. And nonetheless, they are important for our study, and as we're in them now, we'll see a lot of similarities, but each of the authors comes at it with a little different viewpoint and looks for a few different things. Anyway, some thoughts on that. Now, in today's reading, though, I found a couple of things interesting. First of all, Chronicles is a long piece. So you have 1st and 2nd Chronicles, these two books. The reality is it was originally written as one text, David all the way through. And you didn't have this separation from David's reign into Solomon's reign and then on into the other kings. And that's because the Hebrew language has no vowels, and therefore when they translated it from the original Hebrew into Greek, it now took up basically two entire scrolls as opposed to the Hebrew, which took up one, because translating from Hebrew into Greek meant that now in the Greek it is about 1 3/4 times as long as it was in the Hebrew. Therefore, they broke it into two scrolls. It's really meant to be one text, and we go right from David into Solomon. And it would be good to note that, because David and Solomon really do complement one another, and they are part of that complete narrative. And we don't want to just put David away and jump into Solomon, because there were some things that David did that set the precedent and established what Solomon was coming to do here, as we'll read. So then in Chronicles today in our reading, after we kind of get this image of Solomon consolidating his power, we now move on and we find out that the chronicler suggests that Solomon must possess three specific characteristics in order to be ready to build the temple. Number one would be a worship of God, number two would be wisdom, and number three would be wealth. And of course, as we know, all of those things hold true for Solomon. Now, what I found really interesting, though, and what I would bring to your attention today, is in 1 Kings chapter 5. In verses 4 and 5, it says Solomon speaks to not having any adversaries or struggles to deal with, and that is why he is now going to go ahead and build the temple. Of course, we know by way of David that God told David, "You're not going to, your son Solomon's going to." It's interesting that, and I want to make a comparison here in a moment, but it's interesting too that he says, "I will build a temple for the Lord's name," and that just references the fact that in the Old Testament the Israelites worshiped the very name of God so much and reverenced it in such a way that they didn't even speak it. Instead, they used the term Adonai, which means Lord, and that's what they used instead. But by saying for the Lord's name, you literally were reverencing God. It was as if you were building the temple then for the Lord himself. That's how much power they put in a name. So Solomon says, "I'm going to do this because I don't have any enemies I'm battling with." And what's interesting I found in verse 3 is that when he's speaking to Hiram of Tyre, he's saying, "Yeah, my father really couldn't because he had to just protect himself with all these battles and all these enemies." And of course, as we know from Scripture, that's not quite what was said. God told David, "You're not to build a temple because you've shed too much blood and you've fought in too many wars." But we'll give Solomon the benefit of the doubt as a son who's trying to maybe embellish the story a little bit and make it sound a little better for his father. But nonetheless, Solomon decides that, you know what, I got this time on my hand, I got all this wealth, things are going well, I don't have a lot of enemies attacking me, I'm going to build a temple for the Lord. That is what God wants, and that's what I'm going to do. Now, here's the contrast I want to make with you today. If you look in Luke chapter 12, and you'll all remember this in verses 16 to 21, we have this account of Jesus telling this parable about this rich man. And if you remember, this rich man had so much wealth and so much grain that he says to himself, "I'm going to tear down my barns, and I'm going to build bigger barns, and it'll hold all my stuff. And when I'm done with that, then I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry. And that's what I'm going to do now." And of course, we know Jesus' response, as Jesus says, God told him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you." Contrast Solomon with this rich man. God gives them both wealth, time, and everything they need, not a lot of enemies. And what do? Well, one goes in one direction and says, "I will use it to serve the Lord and get busy," and the other one says, "You know what, I'm going to take care of myself and then I'm going to relax and enjoy." And that got me to thinking about my own life today. Am I beset on all sides by enemies, fighting, illness, oppression, all those things, and just trying to get by and survive? Or is my position more like Solomon's and more like this rich man's, relatively calm, free from outside struggles and turmoil? And if that is the case, am I like Solomon and using it to build the temple, to build God's kingdom? Or am I just worried about building more for me and eating, drinking, and being merry? Challenging question for me. I think of the same thing in terms of we as Americans. I think of the same thing in terms of we as church. Are we working to build God's kingdom? Or are we enjoying all of the pleasures and all of the things that we enjoy, and relaxing and taking it easy. I think that's one of the most devious tactics that Satan uses in the lives of us in America especially. Yes, there are people who have major issues that they are dealing with, but many do not. And are our churches marching forward, or are we relaxing into our little oases and resting on our heritage as saints and really just waiting for Jesus to come again? It is certainly a challenge, and especially in our reading today, and at least in this case certainly is a place where we might want to emulate Solomon a little more and get busy and work for the Lord because of all that he's given us. And that's my question for today, and a challenge for my own life, and look forward to talking with you again, and I hope you have a great day. And Heather, we'll look forward to hearing from you again as well. By the way, just a note, did receive an email from Heather J, and she and Brian are having a great time in Norway, so we'll look forward to hearing from them when they come back as well. God bless you all with a great day.